my basalt fist collided in the indigo grid, the world didn't break. It glitched. It was the sound of 1,000,000,000 panes of glass shattering at the exact same microsecond, followed by a silence so absolute it felt like my ear canals had been cauterized. The red brick, the humble clay-fired earth of my grandfather's sweat and toil, didn't just hit the floor. It acted like a surge of raw, unformatted electricity in a clean room. The blue lines of the grid didn't snap, they twisted. "Error," a voice boomed. It wasn't the tall man. It wasn't Lucas. It was the house. It was the mountain. It was the mother. "Anomaly detected. Biological interference in the primary feed." The tall man didn't recoil like a man would. His form simply stuttered. One moment he was a solid pillar of porcelain and shadow. The next he was a vibrating blur, his long limbs multiplying and overlapping like a corrupted video file. His white mask flickered, and for a heartbeat I saw what was underneath. Not gears, not bone, but an infinite spiraling staircase of blue numbers falling forever into a black pit. "Leandro, what have you done?" Lucas gasped. He fell to his knees, his stone body jerking in time with the flickering grid. The blue light in his eyes was turning a chaotic, violent red. "The balance, the sum it's not zero anymore. It's a fraction. It's an irrational number. It won't stop. It won't stop calculating." I felt the power of the red brick. It was warm. It was messy. It was the smell of manure, the taste of rain, the feeling of a bruise. It was everything the void hated because it couldn't be measured. I gripped the brick harder, even as the basalt on my fingers tried to swallow it. "Grandma!" I screamed, looking up at the white-hot star in the ceiling. She responded. The blue wires stitched into her skin began to glow with a frantic, pulsing red. She wasn't a processor anymore. She was a virus. She was taking the earthly energy I had introduced and she was amplifying it, pumping the noise of her life, her memories and her pain directly into the mother's core. "Hard reset initiated," the mother's voice groaned, but the words were breaking apart, distorted by a digital gargle. "Purge the highlands, purge the children." "No!" Grandma's voice suddenly cut through the roar, clear and human for the first time since this nightmare began. "You don't own the highlands. The earth has a soul, and it isn't made of stone." She let out a final agonizing shriek of light. The white star exploded. A massive shock wave of red and white light blasted outward from Grandma, shattering the indigo grid. The void environment began to peel away like burning wallpaper, revealing the dark, muddy cellar of the real house. I felt a violent shove against my chest, a hand of pure warmth. It was Grandma. I couldn't see her, but I felt her touch, pushing me and Lucas away from the collapsing center of the void. "Go, Leandro. Take the boy and run. Don't look back at the floorboards." The floor beneath me vanished. I was falling, but not into the infinite grid. I was falling through the damp, cold air of the highlands. I hit the ground hard, the impact jolting my basalt arm and sending a spray of red mud into my face. I scrambled up, coughing, my lungs finally remembering how to pull in the thick, humid air of the Brazilian night. I was outside. The house, our beautiful red, green, and cold white house, was screaming. The house was vibrating so violently that the roof tiles were shaking off. Blue light was geysering out of the chimney and through the cracks in the walls. The brick pillars were cracking. "Lucas!" I yelled, looking around the yard. He was there, lying a few feet away. He looked like a discarded statue. The blue glow in his veins was gone, replaced by a dull, leaden gray. He wasn't moving. I ran to him, my heavy stone leg dragging in the mud. I grabbed his shoulders and hauled him toward the tree line, toward the dark woods we had just escaped. "Lucas, wake up! We have to go!" Behind us, the house gave one final, earth-shaking groan. The pillars snapped. The entire structure didn't fall. It imploded. It folded into itself. The wood, the glass, and the Mbuya stairs all disappearing into a single, tiny point of blackness that lasted only a second before vanishing into the earth. I stood at the edge of the woods, holding Lucas's cold, heavy body. The tall man was nowhere to be seen. The mother was gone. The grid was gone. But as I looked down at my own hand, still solid basalt, still unyielding, still marked by the void, I realized the nightmare wasn't over. The tall man hadn't been defeated. He had just been evicted, and now he was outside the floorboards. I looked into the dark trees. Tap, tap, tap. He was still marking the wood.
The silence that imploded the house was worse than the scream that preceded it. It was a vacuum of sound that my eardrums throb with the pressure of a world trying to fill a hole that shouldn't exist. I knelt in the red highlands mud, my left hand, the one still made of sweating, trembling flesh, clutching Lucas's shoulder. My right arm was a dead weight of basalt, an anchor of cold stone that seemed to pull at my very skeleton. "Lucas? Lucas, look at me!" I shook him, but it was like shaking a garden statue. He didn't sway, he tilted. His body remained in that rigid, seated posture, his limbs frozen in the geometry of the bike he no longer rode. I pressed my ear against his chest. There was no heartbeat. Instead, there was a sound like a distant computer fan, a faint electronic whirring deep within the cage of his basalt ribs. He wasn't dead, but he was no longer running on a human operating system. He was a piece of idle hardware, his blue eyes dimming to a faint, ghostly flicker as he entered some kind of power-saving mode. The smell of the yard had changed. The wood smoke was gone. The smell of Grandma's baking was gone. Now there was only the scent of a fresh grave and the sharp, nose-bleeding sting of ozone. I looked at the hole, and for a moment I thought I saw Grandma's face in the swirling mist. Not her face as a stone processor, but her face from the old photos, smiling, human. "The earth has a soul," she had said. But as I looked closer, the mist shifted. There was no one in that pit. There was only the vow, a mouth that had finally finished its meal. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the shadows of the araucaria trees to my left. It was a sharp, rhythmic sound, hard porcelain striking dry wood. I froze. My basalt arm let out a low-frequency hum, vibrating in sympathy with the noise. The tall man wasn't gone. He hadn't been swallowed by the mother. He had been released from the clean room of the house. He was here, in the wild, messy world of the highlands. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there, his 9-foot frame towering over the undergrowth. He was watching Lucas, or perhaps he was watching the basalt on my arm. He looked like a gardener surveying a crop that had refused to grow straight. "Leandro," the whisper came from Lucas. His jaw didn't move, but the word vibrated out of his chest. "Lucas, you're back! We have to go! He's right there!" "He is recalibrating," Lucas droned. His blue eyes flared for a second, casting a long rectangular light across the mud. "He is recalibrating." The house was a fixed coordinate. Now the coordinate is moving. We are the coordinates. "I don't care about the coordinates. I'm getting you out of here." I tried to lift him. I wrapped my arms around his stone waist and pulled. I might as well have been trying to lift a mountain. His mineral density was impossible. My fleshy left arm burned with the effort, the tendons screaming, while my basalt right arm simply groaned with a deep, internal grinding sound. I managed to drag him a few inches, leaving 2 deep furrows in the mud. Tap, tap, tap. The tall man was closer now. He hadn't walked. He had simply occupied a tree 20 feet nearer to us. The air around him was shimmering, the trees behind him beginning to lose their organic curves, their trunks squaring off into the raíz cuadrada. "The forest is being updated," Lucas said. "The mother is expanding the grid. There is no away, Leandro. There is only the processed and the noise." "I am the noise," I yelled at the white mask in the trees. I grabbed my Monarch bike. The front wheel was a twisted ruin, useless for riding, but the frame was made of heavy iron. I swung it with my basalt arm, the stone limb giving me a terrifying, mechanical strength I shouldn't possess. I hurled the bike into the woods, aimed straight at the tall man. The bike flew through the air, but as it entered the space around the tall man, it slowed down. The metal began to square off, the round wheels turning into octagons, then squares, before falling to the ground as a heap of geometric scrap. The tall man didn't flinch. He raised a long, needle-pointed finger and pointed it at the sky. I looked up. The stars weren't stars anymore. They were shifting. They were aligning into rows. A vast, celestial grid was being drawn across the night sky of southern Brazil. "The upload is resuming," Lucas whispered. I felt a sudden sharp pain in my basalt shoulder. The gray was moving again. It was crawling up my neck, toward my ear. I could hear it now, the silicon Bible, the sound of 1,000,000,000 numbers being crunched, the scream of the geometry as it claimed the world. I looked at Lucas, then at the hole where my life used to be, and finally at the white mask that promised a perfect, silent eternity. I reached down and grabbed the one thing the tall man couldn't process. I grabbed a handful of the red, wet highlands mud. I smeared it over my basalt arm, covering the glowing blue veins, hiding the geometry under the filth of the earth. "If you want me," I growled, "you're gonna have to dig me out of the dirt." I began to drag Lucas into the deepest, thickest part of the woods, moving toward the old creek where the ground was nothing but muck and roots. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. The more noise I made, the harder it would be for him to find the signal. As we disappeared into the dark, I heard a new sound. It wasn't tapping.
It was the sound of 1,000,000,000 floorboards, all creaking at once, as the entire Serra da Taquara began to open its mouth.